Choose carefully the hills you're willing to die on. Find the win-win in everything you do. In all things, find the positiveness and the blessings. This is prosperity and something greater. My guest today is Dollie Wolverton. As you'll soon discover, I call her Aunt Dollie, but she's not my aunt. She's Tina Del Buono's beloved Aunt Dollie. And Tina, of course, was my guest on this podcast on episode number 6. I've met Dollie multiple times over the years and shared some wonderful Italian wine together provided by her niece. Now, Aunt Dollie's entire career has been in public service. She began as a teacher and an elementary school administrator. And she will tell you the trajectory of her career, which I think everyone should share with their children. It's inspiring how she started by being the first member of her entire family to attend college, to then retiring as Chief of Education for the Head Start Bureau, Department of Health and Human Services in Washington, D.C. in 2006. She's also a community activist focusing on the protection of recreational land. She raises funds for equestrian therapy for children with disabilities, breast cancer research, and she's an advocate for foster care youth. And she funds a county-wide program for Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts where they can play golf for free. Let's meet my friend, Dollie Wolverton. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the podcast. And welcome. I always just think of you as Aunt Dollie. May I call you Dollie?
You bet.
And I don't think of you as Dollie. I think of you as Aunt Dollie, of course.
Exactly.
Because of Tina and the absolutely wonderful relationship that the two of you have. So thank you so much for agreeing to just spend some time with us today and give us your perspective on this really interesting topic. Thank you for joining me.
It's my pleasure, Rem. I really appreciate what you're doing, and I admire it.
Well, that's great. Well, let's just start with my very first question for you, and that is, how would you define prosperity for you?
Well, Rem, my definition of prosperity is good health and happiness. Over the years, I've come to understand that by maintaining my health, I've created a springboard for a wonderful lifestyle. By being healthy, I've had the energy and courage to earn an education and pursue a worthwhile and rewarding career path, while at the same time enjoying a long and happy marriage, traveling extensively, and doing something which really means a great deal to me, paying it forward. Throughout all this, there's been a lot of laughter because one of my beliefs is that life ought to be fun.
Oh, I couldn't agree with you more. And do you attribute your excellent health, my goodness, to anything in particular?
Well, I'm guessing that being a vegetarian for 43 years has made a positive difference. But how I eat is just a regular part of my life, and I don't draw attention to it. In fact, I have family and friends who have never even noticed, and that really pleases me because that isn't what it's all about, you know? The other thing is no smoking. In college, 3-pack samples of cigarettes were often distributed at the end of the cafeteria line. Both of my roommates were smokers, so I gave it a try. But I gagged so strongly that I stopped after a few puffs. So no smoking. I'm also lucky to have inherited a happy attitude, which likely supports good health and happiness. In fact, I have a message from a fortune cookie taped on my computer that says, "You are optimistic when no one else is."
Oh, that's great. Oh, I love that. And I don't know if you've had a chance to listen to the Prosperity podcast episode I did with Dan Buettner. I don't know if you've listened to him yet or not, but go back if you would and review the episode I did with my friend Dan Buettner. He's a best-selling author of The Blue Zones, which is
Oh, sure.
You know that. Well, that's
Yeah.
Dan, and I knew Dan before the Blue Zones. We worked together, and what he just talked about with what you just mentioned about your vegetarianism and your whole approach to living, you will love that conversation that we had. And you said you were blessed with a positive attitude and outlook, and he says that is without a doubt that is a gift that we get, and it can be people that are really predisposed to not be that way. It makes things much harder for them. So
That is so
yeah,
interesting. I will definitely listen to that. I haven't had the opportunity. Yeah.
you'll love it. And then you'll go buy his cookbook, the Blue Zones cookbook, because it's filled with these recipes from all around the world where these folks live well into their hundreds, happy, healthy, vibrant, wonderful lives. So, oh, that's just great. Wonderful. Okay, so let me ask you this. Your career is fascinating. And what was the defining moment or event that brought you to your career path?
Well, I'm going to answer that question, but first I'd like to set the scene. I was the fifth of five children raised in an enclave of Italian immigrants in Detroit, Michigan. Every adult I knew was from the same impoverished village in southern Italy and arrived through Ellis Island. They were all hardworking people without a smidgen of education, including my parents. Eventually, due to my father's health, we moved to Southern California, where the education system was wonderful and I thrived. The week I graduated from high school, a cousin arrived from Detroit to propose marriage. I said no and explained that I was going to continue my education. And my wonderful parents let me make my own decision, and I became the first child among the Italians to go to college. I still marvel that my parents were so modern as to allow their only daughter to pursue an education rather than taking the traditional path of marriage and grandchildren. However, Rem, I didn't get everything I wanted. I wanted to become a doctor, but my Italian daddy said, no, you can't do that because you'll see men without their clothes on. But it's okay for you to become a teacher. So that's what I did. I became a teacher. Next, I earned a master's degree in administration and curriculum development and became a school administrator. And then something absolutely stupendous happened that opened a career path I never could have anticipated. In 1964, President Johnson launched his plan for a great society intended to eliminate poverty and racial injustice. This revolutionary movement included a program named Head Start, whereby children under the age of 5 were going to receive health, education, social services, all in preparation for going to kindergarten, and with the involvement of their low-income families. Although President Johnson never knew this, with the launching of Head Start, he also launched my career. It started in the spring of 1965 with the University of Redlands receiving a federal grant to identify early childhood leaders and prepare and certify them to train the first teams of teachers and aides to go into the classrooms that summer. So what they did was that they identified me as one of those leaders, and I not only trained the teachers that went into the classroom, but I also served as a Head Start teacher that summer. And then at the end of that summer, I was hired to be the Head Start director of Riverside County, which, believe it or not, is 7,208 square miles, which makes it the second largest county in the United States. It has Indian reservations and it has migrant streams, all in this big, huge county. So within a couple of years, always working hand in hand with parents, with staff, and the community, I provided the leadership to more than double the number of Head Start agencies, including starting daycare programs. To enable this rapid expansion, we combined federal and state funds, which at the time was a very innovative approach, since most Head Start programs were relying solely on federal funding. Another major achievement was establishing agreements with nearby colleges to enroll Head Start staff in regular classes with college credit leading to degrees. And this was so important because the staff that we were putting in the classrooms were members of the community itself. So this was giving them an opportunity to progress and to learn and to be recognized and receive credentials and degrees. Those 2 years were so exciting There was no doubt that Head Start was affecting positive change, and I personally believed we were on the path of eradicating poverty. It didn't happen, but I really did believe that. My next career move was to California State Department of Education in Sacramento, which is the state capital in California, where I served as a child development specialist and guided the early childhood programs of school districts located between Los Angeles and San Luis Obispo. That was a wonderful experience. And it gave me the opportunity to work with a very, very fine individual named Wilson Riles. He was the first African American elected to a statewide office in California. And he was the state chief school officer or the state superintendent of schools. And he became my mentor. How lucky could I be, right? And following this, I left and went to Washington, D.C. And as I was getting ready to do that, he said, Dolly, he said, just remember, choose carefully the hills you're willing to die on. Because when you're in Washington, D.C., and you make a ruckus and speak up and so forth and so on about every issue that comes along, it won't be long. Nobody's going to listen to you. But if you listen carefully and you're discerning, then when you stand up on an issue, you will be listened to. And you know, it worked for me. And isn't that great advice? So after Sacramento, I was there for 18 months, and then I went to Washington, D.C. And at that time, President Nixon intended to enact the Family Assistance Program, requiring that all mothers on welfare would either become employed or go into work training programs, and quality childcare was to be provided for their children. Because of my reputation in California, it became my role to oversee the development of a set of federal daycare requirements. However, due to the Watergate incident and the president leaving office, this effort became derailed. So, for the next 2 years, in Washington, D.C., in the same agency, I directed a network of colleges and universities providing technical assistance to local Head Start programs and support of children with disabilities who were integrated throughout our regular Head Start settings. Once again, Head Start was innovative and knocking down barriers because up to then, the tradition in public schools was to keep disabled children in separate classrooms. You never saw them really. Through our actions in Head Start and with pressure from parents, the public schools had no choice but to fully integrate children with disabilities, which was a major victory. I had an advantage, a definite advantage, because I had been in the public school systems. I had been a public school administrator, and then I knew Head Start in and out from the bottom up. And here I was in Washington, D.C., affecting policy, which was a wonderful place to be. So after that, for the next 30 years, I was still in the Department of Health and Human Services, and I became the Chief of Education for the Head Start Bureau. And Rem, I can't tell you what a wonderful job that was and how much change I could help influence in a positive way. It was just a dynamite role. I worked very, very hard, and I loved every minute of it. So, Rem, within 6 years, I followed a trajectory from a local school district to the nation's second largest county, to a state Department of Education, and then to the federal government in Washington, D.C., where I served for 36 years until retirement. And all of it was public service. Who would have guessed such an outcome when my parents gave me the permission to go to college?
Oh my gosh, that is there's so much in there, Dolly. I mean, wow. It just goes to show it's that positive attitude and that approach take you all the way from where you started all the way to Washington, D.C., and then a very long career. And even all those years, and still you're so positive, and all of the battles.
True, I am.
Hey, and the one about the one thing you said where you said, pick the hills you want to make sure that you die on, because people that are passionate can stop being listened to because they're not careful about that exact thing. You have to, control your enthusiasm. And that's a Napoleon Hill principle, actually. Otherwise, people will say, well, Dolly, instead of like, she just spoke, we better listen. So I have one question for you. Whatever happened to the young fellow that you turned down that proposed to you?
Well, it has a happy ending. My father arranged for him to travel to our village in Italy and to marry my father's niece. They were married for over 60 years and raised four lovely daughters.
Oh my gosh, that's
Isn't that
great.
great? That's a win-win situation. He got
Yeah,
got a bride and I got to go to college.
yeah, that worked out really, really well.
Yeah.
And this is the same village in Italy that you and Tina return to
Oh, yeah.
on a regular basis.
Oh, yes. Tina is so Italian. Oh my gosh. She's marvelous. I love that. Love her very much. Yes. We go there often. We've been there many times and throughout Italy, of course, too.
Oh yeah, I know. It's always when we began working together. She's like, "Well, you need to know something. I won't be around every year at this time of the year." And she signs everything. Chin chin, my friend. Yeah, you're right. She is. Hey, so let me ask you this. We all have challenges. We all have these obstacles we have to face. I mean, all of us do. Can you share what you deal with? What gets in your way on your daily journey? What can trip you up?
Well, as we know, our challenges and obstacles are not static. They change as we move through life. A few years ago, a major challenge for me was to ensure the best possible care for my husband, who was ill for 12 years, progressing from a strong and vibrant man to total paralysis and unable to express himself in any way. Monty, a highly qualified caregiver, would arrive at 7 in the morning to take care of him in the best possible ways. I would leave for work and return at 7 in the evening, and I would watch over him through the night. It's no surprise that on some mornings I would be tired and fall asleep on the metro on the way to work, occasionally missing my stop and having to transfer to another train and head back in the other direction. Really, it was challenging, but it's amazing what love and loyalty can do. They're strong motivators for us. So for me, the lesson learned from this experience is that it's a wonderful gift to come through a tough situation and have no regrets. Now I live alone in a comfortable home with so many choices of how to fill my days and live my life. I actually think, Rem, it would take a mountain to trip me up.
I believe it. I so do. Well, what is the top strategy then you use, just to keep you heading in the right direction and not slipping back into, maybe not old habits for you. You don't have those habits, but not slipping back into, a different frame of mind.
Well, I do have a habit that creeps up from time to time. I tend to overthink. And if I get to thinking about an aggravating situation or person, and in my mind going over the circumstances again and again, it totally drains my energy and I just start spinning my wheels. So, to keep heading in the right direction, I try to distract myself by focusing outward. This might include doing several things. Maybe checking in with our local homeless center, although not my regular day to be there, but maybe a substitute is needed at the center or on the streets. Or I drop in on my neighbor, Eddie Lancelotti, which I do every day because I take him the Washington Post and he loves to do the math puzzles. And I have to mention, he's 102 years old and he continues to do his laundry, prepares his meals. I've been his support system since he was 90. He wanted to put me in his will, and I said, no, thank you, Eddie. I just want to be your friend. So I always go to see Eddie every day. Also, when I'm trying to keep myself looking outward, I might cross the street and go to across the soccer field and over to the public golf course, where 6 years ago, in honor of my husband, who was an Eagle Scout, I established a program called Scouts Play Free at Sligo Creek Golf Course. So Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts can play as often as they like, and I take care of their course fees. So I'm over at the course quite often. Or I might communicate via email with a family in Kenya, Africa, with whom I have a direct relationship. This is my 7th year to support the education of their 3 oldest daughters from middle school through vocational certification programs. This sustained support for their education has spared them from marriage at age 13.
Mm.
So, Rem, you get the picture. To keep myself heading in the right direction, in large measure, I focus on helping others.
Boy, I tell you, that's inspiring. How in the world did you get a connection to this family in Kenya? How did that happen?
I know that's really, my father used to call it destiny. It's destiny, isn't it? Yeah. I have a friend who was a volunteer for several years with a charitable organization that was involved in economic development and clean water in African villages. She approached me one day and said she had been contacted by the father of a family with whom she had lived for a month while working in Kenya as a volunteer. She actually had slept for the entire month on the dirt floor of their hut. She explained that the local tourist lodge had been shut down and he no longer had a job as a tour guide. So he was seeking financial help to continue the education of his three older daughters. She asked me if I knew of someone who would help him. I said, well, I never would turn around and ask someone else, but, if I had more information and I thought it was worthwhile, I might consider it myself. So via cell phone, I met the father and received school records for each of the girls, which I printed and spread across my dining room table. Then I asked a long-standing friend from Nigeria to look things over and to give me his opinion. I told him, please tell me if what you see here is real, because I'd like to be helpful, but I don't want to be stupid. After a careful look, he said, Mom, this is real, and it makes me angry because there are people in their country who have money and could help children like this, but instead they send their own children to expensive universities in America and buy them fancy cars. That was his reaction. The rest is history. The eldest has completed her studies as a nutritionist dietitian, has passed the state exams, and in several weeks she will receive her formal certification. The next one has just started technical college to earn certification in tourism management. And the third one is completing boarding school, and I'm guessing she will pursue a career in the arts. We'll see. And when I say boarding school, that sounds so highbrow here in this country, but they don't have schools in their community, in their villages. They have to go to something called a boarding school. And then from there, if they get lucky, they get to have more advanced education. So I'm in it for the long run. I'm changing lives. This is what I believe in.
You sure are. You sure are. Okay. So, Dolly, the people that are listening to this podcast are interested in achieving really their own version of prosperity for them. And what advice can you share?
Actually, Rem, I consider this an easy one. I have three suggestions, and each of them are self explanatory, and I think they support prosperity regardless how one defines it for themselves. The first thing is be nice to yourself and others. You can't go wrong by doing unto others as you would have done unto you, right? Two, don't underestimate the importance of social skills, civility, respect, sensitivity to another's perspective. Overall, good manners. And the third is hold yourself accountable for your own actions rather than blaming others. We all know the importance of being nice to people, Rem. As the saying goes, be nice on your way up because for sure you'll meet them on your way down. Me, that's what
Yeah.
I would say.
I believe the same thing. I've often said to people when I was in corporate life, I was just, sort of naturally predisposed to want to be good to other people. But, as one of the vice presidents, I always just good and interested in the people that didn't report to me, didn't work with me. They worked for others because you just never know. There's going to be a meeting. They're going to say, well, what do you think about Rem for this? And someone's sitting in there. They're either going to say he'd be perfect or they're like, nah, I don't think so. And you just never know who you're talking to. And another story, there's a group that Tina and I have lectured to for years called the American Academy of Podiatric Practice Management. You're very aware of that, I'm sure. And when I first met the board of trustees, we were in a bar in Baltimore having some mostly snacks and something to eat. And as I was really pitching them on the idea that we should maybe do some professional development. It's funny, Dolly, because if I'd have known then what I know now, I was pitching them on doing something they already did. And, but the chairman at the time, Dr. Ornstein, he said, He says, "The whole time we've been sitting here, you have been so nice to that waiter, so polite. I like you. Let's do this."
Oh, what a great
And,
story.
and I think that's just a good story about how, what the way you treat people and the way it's like Stephen Covey's whole book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, I think is just a blueprint for me, always was, of the mature human being that I think we all want to
Uh-huh.
become. And all of the things you just described are, I mean, as you were saying, and I thought that's a mature meaning wise and an appropriate response to our fellow humans, and it's out of vogue right now,
Yes.
and we need to protect that and nurture it when we can. Our culture is currently just so crass, combative, and it's not normal, and we all need to recognize that. Try to pursue that other direction. So that's very inspirational to me, Dolly, and thank you. All right, so here's my fun question. If you were a toy, any toy at all, what would it be and why?
It makes me laugh. I would be a newborn baby doll. That came to me the moment I saw your question. While I was growing up, Rem, often I was told about the morning I was born at home, and family and friends were there hoping it would be a baby girl. Because in those days, of course, they didn't know what the gender was going to be?
Yeah.
And it was so important for our family to have a baby girl. 18 months earlier, within 30 days, my parents lost their 2 little girls to spinal meningitis. So they went from having 2 sons and 2 daughters to having 2 sons. It was very, very difficult for my mother. She almost had a mental breakdown. And although they still had the 2 sons, I was always credited with saving my mother's mental health because she was so despondent over losing her daughters. So my arrival, I always have been told this, created joy. And I've got to believe that a baby coming out of the uterus could sense it. I don't know. I just believe that. I must have sensed that I was wanted, a very wanted child. And I've always heard stories about how everyone celebrated and had a big party on Saturday night. And somehow my grandfather Vincenzo broke one of the windows in the house. So I don't know what that has to do with anything. But nevertheless, that's how I identify with a newborn baby doll.
Oh my. So I assume that's why they named you Dolly?
Well, actually, my name is Elvira Madeline. I was named after my 2 sisters, Elvira
Oh,
Madeline.
really?
And Dolly became my nickname because when I was baptized, family legend has it I looked like a little doll.
Oh my. That's great. I love that answer. That is great.
Uh,
Got one more question before we sign off today, and it's this one. Can you recommend a great book that we should all be reading?
oh, yes. It's a Pulitzer Prize winner entitled Leadership in Turbulent Times, and it's by Doris Kearns Goodwin. It is a fabulous book. Fabulous. It's about 4 of our past presidents: Abraham Lincoln, Theodore Roosevelt, F.D. Roosevelt, Franklin D. Roosevelt, and Lyndon Johnson. And the author does a great job of describing their personalities, their skills, their character traits, and helps you understand what greatness demanded of them because they pay a great price physically and otherwise, the pressure and the commitment. She explains that while worthy leaders achieve greatness through their own grit and determination, it's absolutely essential that they also have empathy and skill in working with people. And boy, do I firmly believe in that. And I know you must too.
Oh my.
Yeah, it's one of those books that once you start reading it, you don't want to put it down. And, I don't care for television. So I end my day with reading for 2 or 3 hours each evening. That means that I accumulate a lot of books. And when I'm finished with them, I send them to a nonprofit in Minneapolis. It's entitled the Women's Prison Book Project, which establishes and maintains libraries in women's prisons. But do you know what? I'm not sending this book to that special cause. I'm keeping it because I've read it twice and I'm going to read it again. It's a
Yeah.
wonderful book.
Well, she's a wonderful historian
Oh
and an
yeah.
author. I have not read that book, though I will now. And I think she's spectacular. So, well, Dollie, thank you so much. As I was thinking of the people that I wanted to speak to and their stories I wanted to hear, I contact Tina and said, do you think there's any way that Aunt Dollie would want to talk to me about this? She goes, I don't know. Let me find out. And then the answer is yes. So thank you for saying yes.
Oh, my pleasure. I just love what you're doing, capturing the nuggets of life and insights from people of all walks of life, really, and all age trends. We're all the spectrum and at different places.
So it has been an utter delight. And, I was looking forward to this project and this journey, but I had no idea it would be so helpful and instructive to me. I'm a different person than when I started doing this. I've learned so much. You listened to that first podcast I did where I was trying to talk about prosperity and, what it is, and it's elusive, and you look at it as countries. That's where I was at. And now I'm so far down the road. It's happiness. Yeah. It's freedom. It's joy. It's service. It's personal. It's just, for me, it's just a goal. It's a goal I have every day now. As you know, I was telling you before we started, every day I just want to have my best day ever, and that includes being prosperous as I define it. And it's only as we define it ourselves. So, well, now that we're all getting vaccinated, I will definitely at some point be seeing you, I know. And when we do, neither you nor I will have to bring a good bottle of wine to share, because we know someone that will. That's and she always does.
Oh, my goodness. And she knows so much about wine. She really
does. Oh, I know.
Yeah. Oh.
Well, she's told me the stories about you meeting Paolo Bea over in Italy, and oh my goodness, yeah, these are. Now we're well into the weeds with the wine stuff, but no, that's a hobby and a passion and joy I share with her for sure. So, anyway, thank you again. God bless you. I'll see you soon, and until next time, chin chin, my friend. Right? Well, there we go.
Chin chin to you, my darling. Thank you so much.
Bye bye. One of the things I learned in speaking with Aunt Dollie, there are so many, is how important it is to say yes. An enthusiastic yes. Yes to college when no one had done it before. Yes to every opportunity that came her way and led her to great influence in our nation's capital. Believe it or not, we just spoke with a very substantial person whose achievements extend far beyond what we were able to speak about today. We only skimmed the surface. Yes to life and to sickness and even the passing of loved ones. Yes to helping so many people in such creative ways. And the energy she has. You might have guessed from the dates that she shared with us about when her career began that she's actually 85 years old today, but you could never guess it from her voice. She is so young in every way. Choose carefully the hills you're willing to die on. Find the win-win in everything you do. In all things, find the positiveness and the blessings, and find your own path to prosperity through service to others. Let me know what you think. You can send me an email at rem@toppractices.com. Prosperity is the entire focus of Top Practices. Most doctors are struggling with the business of medicine, and those that aren't truly understand that through association with other successful practitioners, they can take their success to the next level or something greater like prosperity. Prosperity in business is a function of mindset, marketing, and management, and that is our mission at Top Practices. You can find out more about Top Practices, our marketing and management programs for doctors, our workshops, and our annual summit at toppractices.com. Until next time, this is Rem Jackson. Smile when you wake up, and then have a really great day. Your best day ever. Nothing is more important.